Hi, I'm Bob Tabor with LearnVisualStudio.net. Our ultimate vision for the app is to allow the user to select one or more photos that will be used as the lock screen images for our phone. So our game plan in this lesson is to add a reference to the Windows Phone Toolkit so that we can utilize a special control called the Long List Multi-Selector, which is an improved version of the Long List Selector that we've been using that allows the user to make multiple selections in the list. And then we're going to convert, in our project, the long list selector to a long list multi-selector and add some attributes to its definition that would enable its unique functionality. So we're going to download the long list multi-selector from a package called the Windows Phone Toolkit. It extends what we get out of the box with the Windows Phone 8 API, adding new components and functionality. And so you can see that to get to the Codeplex site containing the code, I navigated to phone.codeplex.com. And typically I would click the downloads link. However, there are no downloads. They want you to grab it from Codeplex. However, I want to get the source code because there's a phone toolkit sample 8 that I want to work with. So I'll just go ahead and click the download. It'll ask me, do you want to save the phone-85045? There might be a different version number for you. Just save it to disk. Let's view downloads. I want to open it up. Actually, what I want to do, I'm going to go to downloads, right click and select extract all, and I'm going to put this in a new Windows Phone Toolkit folder on my hard drive. Okay, and when it pops open, I'm going to double click the phone toolkit.sln, the solution file, and when it asks me, do I want to open it with the Express Edition, then I'm going to click OK. If you don't see this, that means you're probably running Visual Studio 2012 or greater. It also gives me a security warning about the project. Don't trust code that you download from the internet. Don't trust anything from the internet, as a matter of fact. Alright, so after a few moments, we can see a lot of code loaded into our main area. What I want to do, we're going to close up all the Windows Phone 7 stuff, and I want to look at the solution structure. You can see that there's a folder called Windows Phone 8, and inside of there is both the toolkit and a toolkit sample.wp8. That's what I want. In fact, I'm going to right-click this and set this as my startup project. Alright, and then I'm going to go ahead and click Run on my toolbar. And so we see a list of the controls in the Windows Phone Toolkit, and there are just a number of controls that are available here. And so you should take a few moments and just look over all of the controls that are available. For example, I love the date picker. So let's take a look at the date and time picker here. And what you can do is say, okay, I want to change the select date. And when you do, look at this cool visualization that you get. I can click on either the month, the day, or the year, and then change the value. And say, yep, that's the one I want, all right. And it will change the value. I can select a time and look, I get hours, minutes, and AM or PM. And I say, yep, that's what I want, all right. And so look at how that works just nicely. Some of the control examples have multiple pages as well. There's another one that I just absolutely love, and I would love to figure out a use for this in some app that I want to build. It's called the hub tile control. It's strangely calming if you watch it for a few minutes. Things just kind of gently slide into place. Fruits, and I love the images that they chose too. It's very calming to me. But at any rate, let's go back. The one that I'm most interested in for our purposes is the long list multi-selector here. And you can see that the sample demonstrates several different modes that it can be used in to enable multi-selectable lists. So for example, if I choose the little selection button at the bottom, I can choose multiple list items from a list, which is pretty neat. And then I can choose the little delete button to get rid of, to delete those email messages or whatever the case might be. That's great, but that's not exactly what we need for our Around Me project. Now, fortunately, the control's appearance and functionality can be configured in multiple ways. If you swipe over to the past the standard long list menu to the grid mode panel or pivot, there's another example that involves image thumbnails. So if you click on an image, it shows you a larger version in a lightbox. However, when you click the icon in the app bar at the bottom, you can switch to grid selection mode. And now this allows you to select one or more images. And notice the little red and white check mark icons in the upper right hand corner of the selected images. That's really cool. That's exactly what we want for the results of our Flickr API call results. This will allow the user to select multiple images to be saved to the phone randomly and then used for the lock screen every 30 minutes or so. All right, so I'm sold. This is exactly what I want. Let's go ahead and close out of this and get back into our Around Me project. And what we're going to do is actually pop open and go to NuGet to see how will I go about getting this into my project. So packages/WP toolkit. And I may have seen this information on Codeplex, but I just didn't, it wasn't obvious to me. Whereas here I can see the obvious install package WP toolkit instruction. I'm going to go ahead and just copy that, Control C to my clipboard, go back here, and then go to my package manager console, which should be available. And I'm just going to paste that in, install dash package WP toolkit, enter. And now the Windows Phone Toolkit is part of my project. And if we look at the list of references, you can see that it added, I think this Microsoft.phone.controls.toolkit. We also get a toolkit.content folder that has some icons that are used in the toolkit. And then finally we get this README first file. And we could delete this README first. I'll go ahead and leave it in there. It's not bothering anything now. Okay, so very cool. Okay, so now what we're ready to do is modify our search results.xaml page. We're going to be upgrading to the long list selector control, long list multi-selector control rather, and we're going to change a few attributes to enable the enhanced features that we're going to utilize. Before we can use that control, we're going to need to create an XML namespace entry in the phone application page element at the very top of the page. So I'm going to do this, kind of in the last XML namespace, XML NS, and we'll add toolkit equals CLR dash namespace colon Microsoft.phone.controls. Then we're going to give it the assembly where it's contained in. So assembly equals Microsoft.phone.controls.toolkit. All right. So the XAML namespace basically says this: when you see a XAML element prefixed with the toolkit prefix, then look in the following assembly for the following CLR namespace for that class's definition. So somewhere in the Windows Phone Toolkit code, there's a namespace defined as Microsoft.phone.controls.toolkit, and it has a class name long list multi-selector, among others. So the compiler parses the element. In this case, we'll change our phone long list selector to a toolkit long list multi-selector, and we'll have to change a few other references to it here as well. Long list multi-selector, and then here, and we'll go toolkit long list multi-selector, and we'll do it here too. Toolkit long list multi-selector. All right. So the compiler will parse that element, toolkit long list multi-selector. It knows to create an instance of that specific class that's referenced by the CLR namespace. So in a nutshell, that's all there is to it. But you can learn even more about XAML namespaces and how you map to custom classes and assemblies at this URL on screen from MSDN. Okay, so now that we have the XAML namespace defined and we've already referenced the long list multi-selector, we need to make a few additional changes to kind of enable all of its special functionality. Layout mode is still grid. The cell size is still good at 105. The item source is still good. Now what we want to do is add an enforce is selection enabled equals true. And then we're also going to add a selection changed event handler. I'm going to go ahead and give it a name. Photos for lock screen underscore selection changed, like so. And I'm going to go ahead and create that method stub by right clicking and navigating to the event handler. Okay, we'll come back to that. Well, let me explain this here. Enforce is selection enabled equal true. It's basically what allows for the multi-selection behavior, so it has to be set. All right, if you don't set that, we don't get multi-selection. All right, so let's go ahead and run the app. Okay, and let's just go food. Just try anything here. All right, so these are pics of people eating food at the John Hancock Center. And now let's test for multi-selection. Outstanding. Look at that. Beautiful selection. Selection behavior. Very nice. Okay, success. So just to recap, the big takeaway from this lesson is the Windows Phone Toolkit. What it is, what additional features it supplies, how to incorporate it into our app using NuGet, and adding the XAML namespace and so on. So here again, there's so much for us to leverage to build our apps on top of. In most cases, all we have to do is think about the features that we want to support and focus on, and then just find that feature built by somebody else in some framework. Most of the heavy lifting has been done by somebody else, so we can just utilize it in our app by calling a few methods and properties and declaring it right. So we just need to become aware of that these resources exist and how to add them into our project and how to leverage them. So that's it for this lesson. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Hi, I'm Bob Tabor with LearnVisualStudio.net. In this lesson, we'll refine our search results page by animating the images as they're loading in from Flickr. We want the images to ease in, to fade into view. We also want to provide feedback to the user of the app for long-running operations like retrieving these photos over a slow internet connection by adding a progress indicator like we've done before. And finally, I want to add some feedback in case the user searches their current location and topics and Flickr has no results to return. We don't want to leave the user in the dark waiting for photos to appear that never come, so we'll give them a simple little feedback message. So our game plan in this lesson, first of all, is to modify our long list multi-selectors data template. We're going to prepare the image control for the fade-in effect that we're going to implement. Then we're going to create an animation and storyboard in C# that targets the image control to enable the fade-in effect. We're going to make provisions for the possibility that there are no photos on Flickr that match our search criteria by creating and then hiding a little text block that will unhide whenever there's no photos to show. And then finally, we're going to add a progress indicator that will run while we're performing the web service call to Flickr and loading the images. Again, good visual feedback for the end user. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to want to do is to set the initial opacity attribute of the images in our data template to 0. And so 0 is completely transparent and 1 is completely opaque. So 0.5 would be partially transparent opaque. Then for each image in our data template, as that particular image is downloaded from Flickr, we're going to add an event handler for the image opened event and the event handler will fire off and we'll write code then to animate the change of opacity from 0 to 1. Okay, so that'll give it that fade in effect over a half second, 1 second, 2 seconds, whatever we decide to set it to. All right, so we're going to make the following changes in the XAML to kind of set things up for the image control. So I need to, first of all, set the opacity equal to 0. That's a starting point. And then we're going to handle the image opened event handler. And I'm just going to call this image underscore image opened. All right, and let's navigate there. Right click, select navigate to event handler. All right, so here we're going to write some C# code to animate the fade in effect. Now there's many examples of animation that you'll see that use XAML to define both the storyboard and the animations that are associated with the storyboard. Then use C# code to kick off the animation when a certain event is triggered. And we did that in our previous soundboard app that we submitted to the store. And we could do it that way, but we chose to do it with C#. There's actually one advantage for our scenario that kind of requires C#. So we've already talked about the nature of animations and things of that nature. So let's go ahead and just begin by writing the code. So we're going to work with the sender, and the sender should be an image. So image img equals sender as image. We should understand from earlier in the series what that means. We're expecting the object to be an image, so we're going to cast it right off the bat to an image, to a XAML image control. So if the image is null, then we'll just exit out of this return. Okay, that's better. All right, so the next thing we're going to need to do is create a storyboard. So we're going to do this in C#, storyboard, s equals new storyboard. All right, and we're going to have to add a using statement to the system.windows.media.animation namespace. All right, then I'm going to create a double animation, and we'll pair up the animation, which will go from 0 to 1, with to set the opacity of the image, and then we'll pair it up with the image in the storyboard by calling set target and so on. So here we go. Let's create a double animation. We're going to call this double Annie equals new double animation. This double animation is going to be set to 1. So it's currently 0. We're going to set it to 1. And we'll set the duration. So we're going to set it over a period of time. We'll create a new duration object, and the duration takes a time span object. So create time span dot from milliseconds. So we'll do it over the course of a half a second, 500 milliseconds. All right, and just for fun, you know what? Don't tell anybody this, but I'm going to change that to 2 seconds, and we can just see it slowly fade in. It'll be a little bit more visible in our videos, but we'll want it to be more subtle. If we were to release this, we want it just to fade in nicely, not just slowly fade in. That would be annoying over time. Okay, so now let's go to the storyboard and set its target. And here's where we take a timeline. Remember that animation objects derive from timeline, so we can give it the double animation that we've already created and set up, and the dependency object, the target. I don't want to talk about what dependency objects are in this series, a little bit of an advanced topic, or dependency properties. Don't want to talk about that at all either, kind of an advanced XAML topic. But in our case, it's easy. It's what we're targeting. It's the image control that we're targeting, okay? So we'll also need to set the target property. What do we want to change? So with the double animation, we want it, and we're going to tell it the path of the property. In other words, the opacity property of our image control. Okay? And we're going to add this double animation to the collection of children that the storyboard owns, and then we'll kick it off like so. So okay, what I'm going to show you on screen right now is approximately the XAML that we could use to do all the storyboard animation stuff that we've written between lines 66 and 77. So it can be much shorter. However, this approach with the XAML is flawed because we would be targeting a single image control. And as far as I know, you can't use a binding expression inside of a storyboard.target name to make it dynamically apply to every image control in our data template. So that's one reason why we're using the C# approach. It'll work better for our purposes here. Okay. Also, I kind of just glanced by the property path XAML syntax. Here's an article so you can read a little bit more about how that works on MSDN. But in a nutshell, the property path is used to specify the property that's the target of the animation. Now we have a simple case, and so for now I think it's just easier to understand that the property path object provides a map to find the property, the dependency property. I don't want to talk about dependency properties, but to find the property that we want to animate. So let's do this. I think we have enough here that we can watch our images fade in. Let's go ahead and run it. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and type food again. Now watch closely as the images come in. They should be animating in over 2 seconds. Yes, see, it all came in slowly. Very nice. So we've satisfied the topic of this lesson, the title of this lesson, but I want to add a few more features into our app while we're in here. We're going to provide some feedback to the user to let them know the status of their searches against the Flickr API. So let's go and exit out of this. And so the first thing I want to do is go to the mainpage.xaml, or actually I want to go to the search results.xaml, and right before the long list multi-selector I'm going to add a text block. So text block name equals no photos found, visibility, visibility equals collapsed, text equals no photos found, and we'll do a little frown face there. And the other thing that I want to do is I'm going to style this, and I'll just use a static resource. Static resource, phone text title to style. See, I've got this all confused here. There we go, much better. And then the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to add a stack panel. And inside that stack panel, I'm going to add a text block. And I'm going to put the text equals loading. So this will tell the user that we're currently trying to load the images. And here I'm going to use a progress bar, but I'm not going to put it inside the system tray. Instead, we're just going to put it here in the stack panel. All right. So let's give it a name. So there's more than one way to work with some of these things. Overlay progress bar. And we talked about is indeterminate before. And we're going to say true. It's not determinate. In other words, we want it just to continue on and on. Okay, so let's adjust the positioning of this. Let's set the vertical alignment equal to the center, and the visibility, I'm going to choose collapse, which means invisible. And let me also give this a name because I think we're going to need to access it programmatically. We'll call this overlay. And then the text block 2, let me set its horizontal alignment equal to the center. Now, in the search results loaded event handler at the very top here. Let's go ahead and get rid of this. We don't need that anymore. Let's go overlay, it's the name of our stack panel, dot visibility equals visibility.visible. And let me just get rid of that. I don't think we need that. Okay. So the visibility enumeration, setting it to visible. And then the overlay progress bar, we'll set that to is indeterminate equals true. And so now we're displaying our progress bar, and it is moving dots across the page at a rapid pace. And now what we want to do, at the very bottom here, is we're going to display our no photos found if there are no images returned back from our call to get Flickr images. So if images.count equals 0, then no photos found dot visibility equals visibility dot visible. Otherwise, we don't want to show that. No photos found dot visibility equals visibility dot collapsed. Great. Finally, that overlay that we displayed here, we want to hide it now. So here we go. Overlay dot visibility equals visibility dot collapsed. Great. And finally, overlay progress bar dot is indeterminate equals false. Great. All right, everybody's happy. Good. Let's run it. Let's see what we get. So we want to test both of these scenarios. The first time I'm just going to search for something crazy. Just crazy. Let's see. Hopefully there's no Bob Tabor's photos tagged with Bob Tabor in our results. Okay, so you can see no photos found. Let's go ahead and search again because I missed something here. Let's go Clint Rudkus. Search for that. Loading. Hey, we got our loading thing. Yep. Okay. I didn't catch it the first time, but that absolutely works. Awesome. All right. So just to recap, the big takeaway from this lesson is animation in the Windows Phone API. We created an animation object to control the change of a property over time and pair that animation object with the object and add that pairing to a storyboard. So these little touches that we've added, almost imperceptible, make our app stand out from the competition and earn the respect of our users. We also added feedback to the user about the state of the app while it's making that long call out to the Flickr API. We did that with a progress bar and a message and let the user know when we couldn't find any Flickr images that matched their criteria. Again, we're trying to consider this from a user's perspective. I've used plenty of apps where I wasn't sure if the app was still working or if it had locked up or whatever. So these little touches help the user gain confidence in the app and enhance their emotional tie to it. All right, we'll continue on in the next lesson. We'll see you there. Hi, I'm Bob Tabor with LearnVisualStudio.net. Our app is coming together nicely, but there's one last feature that we want to implement. So when the user selects one or more Flickr images from the long list multi-selector on the results, search results.xaml page, we'll want to take the Flickr image data and serialize it to disk using JSON. So in this first pass, we're going to then randomly select one of those Flickr image instances as the lock screen image, and we'll do that once. Then in the next lesson, we're going to randomly select from that list of serialized Flickr images once every 30 minutes, which is ultimately our goal. All right, so our game plan in this lesson is to start off by adding an app bar to the search results.xaml page, and that app bar will have one button so that when at least one item is selected on the long list multi-selector, we'll display it, we'll show the app bar, otherwise we'll hide it. And then we're going to add a click event handler, or we'll handle the click event for the button to set this list of images as the list that we want to choose from randomly. And then finally we're going to create a class that will hold a series of helper methods that will actually take care of all the hard work of cleaning up all the images from our previous set. We will then save the new list, the Flickr list, to local storage, and then we'll also create a helper method to randomly select one Flickr image data and then download the image and use it as the phone's lock screen image. Okay, so this is a very code-intensive lesson. For the most part, I'm going to provide an overview of the lines either as I'm going through it, one line at a time, or entire sections. Hopefully, most of it will be obvious to you what I'm trying to accomplish. If I don't explain everything, then I would strongly encourage you to take a look at Microsoft's documentation. It is always the definitive source that you should be referencing for information about classes and methods. You really can't become a serious developer without consulting MSDN several times a day. Or several times an hour. Okay, so let's start off by adding the app bar. We've done this several times already. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy and paste the code that we've already written from the main page.xaml.cs to our search results.xaml.cs file. And ideally you wouldn't do this, but most of the code is boilerplate. I'm going to just go ahead and change a few things about it here. For example, we will change the button, and we're going to use this toolkit.content application bar check.png file. So let's use that. And then the next thing I want to do is I'm going to set the text equal to set, and then let's go ahead and let me go ahead and rename this completely. So plus equals, and then we'll choose the app bar button underscore click tab tab. We'll come back to that in a little while. We'll want to add the app bar button, great, and we'll get rid of all this, actually this part right here, and we'll leave that. So that's pretty much what we want. Very good. Let me go ahead and also here at the very top go application bar dot is visible. So we'll set it to false initially, and then we'll only show it whenever there's multiple selections, and we'll do that in just a second here. Let's get rid of that too. Good. And then obviously we'll want to call this from the constructor of our class search results constructor. All right, and so now I need to add the display logic that will actually then turn is visible equal true whenever one or more items are selected in the long list multi-selector. Now you recall previously we added this selection changed event and set it to this this event handler called photos for lock screen underscore selection changed. Let me also give this the name of photos for lock screen, like so. And then here what we'll do is go to that method stub that was created previously, and what we want to do is add some simple logic here so that if photos for lock screen selected items dot count is 0. Actually, we don't need that. We'll just go application bar dot is visible equal. Otherwise, we'll set it true. Okay, that was easy enough. Okay, so what I want to do is get a subset here of the selected Flickr images. So imgs equals new list Flickr image, great. And what we'll do is we're going to go through each item that's in the long list multi-selector, so photos for lock screen dot selected items dot or just selected items. So each item should represent a Flickr image. So we should be able to do this type of conversion. So image equals item as Flickr image. All right, and we'll do a little check here. Make sure it's not empty, and then we will add it to our little list. And now that we have this subset, this list of selected items, we can pass it into a series of helper methods. So let's make a to-do list of the types of things that we're going to need to do to make this all work. First of all, I'm going to want to clean out all of the images that are currently in isolated storage. Then I want to save this new list of selected images to isolated storage. And then finally, I want to randomly select one item and set it as the lock screen. All right, and then once all these operations are complete, I want to give some feedback to the user that the set operation has completed. So we'll just show a message box, and the message we'll give is, I don't know, you have a new background, assuming everything went okay. We'll give it a title and what we want it to have in terms of a button on the bottom of it. Let's have an OK button. All right, so let's just run the app real quick and see the general flow of things as it stands right now. Okay, so I'm going to type in the word food again and click search. All right, and we'll click a couple of, notice when I click the pizza icon that our app bar appeared, and I'll just select a few more and click the little check mark, and it says you have a new background. Great. Now comes the hard part, where we have to do all of the hard work in these little to-do items. So I want these to be in their own class, a class of helper methods, and you'll see ultimately I'm going to take this class and move it in the next lesson, but for now that's why I'm separating all this functionality out into its own class file. All right, so I'm going to add a new class, and we're going to call this lockscreenhelpers.cs. And click add. And so the very first thing I want to do here is to clean out storage. So I'm going to come up with a helper method name called lockscreenhelpers dot, and I'll create a static method called clean storage, like so. All right. So now let's go ahead and implement that. So public static void clean storage. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to get the isolated storage for our app, and we're going to attempt to delete all of the files inside of the folder where we're saving off our images ultimately. We don't have those folders yet in place, but also I want to save off, I want to delete any files that are in a folder that we're going to use for the icons that we'll use as flipped images in the start icon tile. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. Let's first of all do the part we know. We know how to go isolated storage file. Let's go ahead and add a using statement for this. So system.io.isolated storage. We want to get the storage folder, isolated storage file dot get user store for application. All right, so we have the user store. And now what we want to do, I'm going to actually call out to a helper method to try to delete all files inside of a given folder. And so inside of our isolated storage area, we're going to have two subfolders. So let me go ahead and create two constants. So private const string. We'll call the first folder the background root. And we'll set that equal to images. And then private const string icon root, where we'll save the icons that are used to cycle through for the start bar icon. Those will be in shared shell content. Okay. And now we'll create this private static void. Try to delete all files, and we'll pass in the isolated storage file, which is really just the folder where we're for our isolated storage for our app, and then also one of these two directories. So string directory. So just to make sure that it exists, let's do a check first. Storage folder dot directory exists, and then we'll give it the directory. So if it exists, then we'll perform these tasks. And what we're going to want to do is go to the storage folder dot get the file names, and then we're going to loop through each file and delete it. So if you take a look at the help for this little method, it is going to return us an array of strings. So we'll go string array called files equals get file names. I guess we're going to have to give it the directory as well. And then we'll just do a simple for each. String file in files will delete the file. So storage folder dot delete file, and then we'll use the directory plus the file name. Okay, and just to be on the safe side, whenever we're working with any kind of folder operations, especially reads or writes, we should probably wrap them with a try and a catch. So let's do that. Whoops. And then if there is an exception, then we're probably just going to ignore it, because the file could be in use, and it could be, you know, the operating system might be using it for some reason. Let's not completely choke on that. We'll just gracefully ignore it, and then we'll get that file at some point in the future the next time we call this try to delete all files. But I think we're ready now. We can pass in storage folder and then each of the two folder names. So background root and then icon root. All right, very nice. So I think that's going to satisfy our first to-do item. The next thing we're going to need to do is save this list of selected images to isolated storage. We're going to, again, take it, we're going to serialize it into JSON, and then store that JSON file onto disk. So to do that, let's create another helper method down here. And this time we're going to call this one we'll go public static void save selected background screens. And we're going to want to pass in that list of Flickr images, that subset, selected by the user in the long list multi-selector. All right, so let's start off with JSON convert, and we'll need to add a using statement. JSON convert.serialize object, and we'll pass in data. And I believe, let's see, this will give us back the serialized data in the form of a string. So string, or let's just do string data. And now that we have that, we want to write it to disk. So we've done something similar to this before. Let me just go through it real fast. All right, we're going to need to give this thing a name. So I'm going to call it lock screen data, and we'll create a constant for that a little bit later. Let me think about this first. So now let's go ahead and create a private const string lock screen data, and we'll just call this lockscreendata.json. So that'll be the name of the file. Very good. So that part's easy. Let's go and add that here. So we're going to save that list to disk. And we're going to give it that collection, right, of images. Oh, lock screen helpers. There we go. Nice. Okay. Now the final part here is that we're going to randomly select one item and set it as the lock screen. This is going to be a little bit tougher. So I'm going to call so lock screen helpers dot. We'll call this set random image from local storage, something like that. And let's go ahead and implement this in our lockscreenhelpers.cs class. So let's go public static void set random image from local storage. And we're going to have to take this in a couple of different steps. The first thing we want to do is to actually do the opposite of what we did here. We're going to read out this file, deserialize the file from JSON into a list of Flickr image. Then once we have that, we'll randomly pick one of those items in that list of Flickr image to make the lock screen. Then we're going to have to set or grab the image down from the internet, step 2, and then step 3 will be to set it as the lock screen. All right, so there's really 3 parts to this, so I anticipate there's going to be 3 methods. I'll just keep separating these out into their own little helper methods. All right, so let's start with the first part, which is to actually deserialize the file we need. So we get that list back out. So this is going to start very familiar to everything else we've done up to this point. Isolated storage file, just to get a reference to our storage folder. All right, so let's make sure that file exists, because if we run this for the first time, it may not exist yet. And we can save ourselves a little bit of headache this way. So if it doesn't exist, then just return. We don't need to do this. But if it does exist, then we're going to want to isolate storage file stream storage folder dot open file lock screen data, and we want a file mode open. Great. And inside of there, we're going to need to read that baby out. So we're going to know we're using a stream reader. Reader equals new stream reader. And we'll pass in I think we can give it a file stream. So let's just give it this stream, like so. And then finally, to grab the data out, we'll call reader.read to end. To end. Great. And let's make this file data of just a local variable here. So string file data, like so. Okay, very cool. So that's the first part of it. So we have this string that represents what? It's JSON data that represents a list of Flickr image. So let's get it out of that by going JSON convert. And we'll do the opposite here, which is deserialize object, giving it the type we want to deserialize it into. So list of Flickr image. Give it the file data. Awesome. Okay. All right, let's make sure that images is not empty. So if it's not equals null, then we can randomly find one image that we want to work with. So we're going to work with the random class. Random number equals new random. And we're going to get a random number by using int index equals random number dot next. Give me the next one from 1 to images count. That'll be the top end. Okay. And then the last thing we'll need to do is just give me a to-do here. I've got the one I want. I'm going to need to set the image as the lock screen. Okay. So let's call a new helper method to do that part. So public static void set image, and we're going to need to give it, in order to set the image, we're going to need to find the image, and the image is going to be out on the internet, and so we're going to need to call out to the internet, and we're going to need a address or a URL or a URI to grab it. Okay. And so what I need to do though is there's a couple of parts to this. I want to grab it and save it to isolated storage in both of these directories, the background root and the icon root. All right, so let's start there. That's the part I understand. So isolated storage file, storage folder, just like we've been doing all along. We got to get that reference equals isolated storage file dot get. Yep. Okay. And now, so all right. We could potentially already have this file on disk, so let's make sure that it's not already there. If it's not, then we need to go grab it down from the internet. So storage folder dot file exists, and the name of the file will be, we need, all right, that URI is going to be a full address, but we need just the local address potentially. So we need to construct a URL. So let's give it something called image name. So if the file exists, image name. So we've got to construct an image name. So let's do that here. String image name equals. And so I know part of it's going to be the background root, but we also need just the file name part of this URI. So let's do this. String file name equals. Now fortunately URI has this segments, I guess a method or a property or something. Here, let's take a look at it. URI segments property. And what you can do, it says the segment property returns an array of strings containing the segments, the substrings from the URI's absolute path. The first segment is obtained by parsing the absolute path from its first character until you reach a slash or the end of the path. Okay, so the example here is this is a segment, this is a segment, whoops, this is a segment, and then the file name itself is a segment. So we want this last segment. So to get at that, we'll go segments and we'll index into it using URI.segments. How many segments are there? Let's get its length and then subtract 1 because it's going to be 0 based. All right, so that should give us just the file name part of the URI. And now that we have that, we can construct the image name. So it's going to be the background root plus the file name. Great. All right, so if we've already got that, if we don't already have that image name in our isolated storage, then we want to go grab it down from the internet. All right, so we're going to need a file to retrieve that into. So we're going to go using isolated storage file stream, called stream, equals storage folder dot create file, which should return, yes, an isolated storage file stream, and then we'll give it the image name. Wait, image name? Yes, we want to create the file on the in isolated storage, so we'll give it that name. Now we need to get out, and we'll use our HTTP client. Uh-oh, we don't have a reference to that. That was the previous project, I think. Do we have a reference to that? System.net.http, is that the right one? Well, we do have that here. I think we've already got that in our project. Yes, we had to have had it in our project. Sorry, I'm getting things all mixed up in my mind. All right, so client equals new HTTP client. Great. And so what we want to do is client dot, and this time we're not bringing back string values. We want to bring back data that can be put into an image file to create an image file. So we're going to need get byte arrays async, and that will return a string of bytes. All right, and it's awaitable too. So we'll have to do this. Byte array flicker result equals await client.getByteArrayAsync, giving it the URI. Yes. Yes. No? Oh, yes. Async. There we go. Beautiful. All right, so now we've got all the bytes. Now we got to write them to disk. So stream dot write async, and we're going to give it the byte array, so flicker result, and then we're going to give it the offset and how many bytes to use. So we want to start at 0 and give it the entire thing. So flicker result dot length. All right, and that's how you pass all the bytes into the file. And it's awaitable, right? Yes. So we need to call it like that. Great. And so now that we have that file sitting in our isolated storage in our images folder, we said we also wanted to create a copy of that for the purpose of the start screen. We want to use all the images on the start screen and cycle through them. So we're going to put a copy of it in this shared shell content. So I'm going to copy our file. So right here, we're going to go storage folder dot copy file. There we go. And we'll take the image name, and we're going to need to create a new image name because this is going to be for the background root, so we need an icon name. So let's go string icon name equals that icon root plus the file name. So from the image name to the icon name, I think this is going to work. All right, awesome. Phew. Okay, so there we go with that. Let's clean up a little bit. I think the last thing we're going to need now to do is to actually set the lock screen. And that reminds me, now that we have set image complete, I can call that from here. So set image, and we're going to pass in, I think we have images, right? Yes, images, and give me the random item that was selected, and we want the URI for the larger image version. Awesome. Okay, good. So now let's call set lock screen. And this one's a little bit trickier. Let's go private static void set lock screen. And we're going to need to give it the name of the file. Now, we could probably just churn through this. However, this is going to be borrowed heavily from this article on MSDN, Lock Screen Background for Windows Phone 8. And I highly recommend as background material you read this entire thing. But ultimately what we need to do is really two steps. Here's the code that we're going to need to write. We're going to need to become the phone's background provider for lock screen images. And I'll walk through what all this code means in just a moment. But in order to enable that functionality to say that our phone is available as a lock screen background provider, we're going to have to add a special extension to our wm-app-manifest.xml file. So that's a good first step. Now the good news is that, see, there's a bunch of stuff in here. I don't know what it does. As far as extensions are concerned, as far as I know, this is the only extension that's even available on the phone API, this lock screen underscore background, again, as far as I know, today. And so I'm just going to copy this, and then we're going to open up our wm-app-manifest.xml. Now, typically, when we just double-click and open it up, we get the friendly designer, and that limits the choices that we can make here, and it makes it easy for us. But there's no design support for this extensions XML element. So what we'll have to do is right-click this file and select Open With, and then choose XML Text Editor with encoding, and then click OK. And yes, we'll let it auto-detect the type of encoding. And then beneath this tokens area right here, I want to paste in that extension stuff that we copied from MSDN. And then I'm going to save all that and get out of that. All right, now we're going to come back to this set lock screen. And this will be borrowed heavily from this passage. In fact, I could probably just copy and paste all of this directly into my project, but I'm going to rewrite it because I want to change the names of some things. And we can also talk through what we're doing here. But again, I want to emphasize that that is required background reading for this step in the lesson. All right, so let's begin. And first of all, we're going to find out, are we currently the back screen, the lock screen provider of images to the phone? If not, then let's ask for that permission from the user of the phone. If they say yes, then we can continue on and choose one of our photos randomly to be the photo on the lock screen. Okay, so that's the overall process. So first of all, we're going to get to this lock screen manager, and we'll have to add a using statement to get at that. So it's in the windows.phone.system.userprofile namespace. Good deal. And we're going to ask, is the lock screen manager provided by the current application currently? And that's going to return back a bool. So let's get bool. Do we currently have access for the lock screen? Yes or no? True or false? If we don't has access for lock screen, then we're going to request it. So we're going to call lock screen manager dot request access async. When you see the async, you should be thinking, is it awaitable? And it is, which means we're going to have to add async to get this to work. And notice that this returns back an object of type lock screen request result. Now, I don't want to create that, so I'm just going to use var. So var access requested. All right, very good. And now we'll set has access for lock screen equal to, and we'll say is access requested equal to the lock screen request result granted. If it is, then we're good. We do has access for lock screen. If this is evaluates to false, then we do not. But if we do has access for lock screen, so if has access for lock screen is true, then we can do the next biggie, which is to actually set. So lock screen manager, or just lock screen dot, we're going to set the image URI. So we got to build that image URI. Where's that image stored? Let's create a URI. So image URI equals new URI. All right, and this is where the article can really help out. This will give us the absolute position on the phone. So the following code example shows how the new URI schema. MS data points to the root of the local app data folder. MS appx points to the local app install folder to reference resource. All right, so I think what we want is this second part right here. So let's copy that out. Control C to copy just that part. So new URI, paste that in there. Yes. And we'll give it the background root plus the file name. And this is an absolute this time. Okay, and then we'll give it image URI. Phew. Now we can come back here and call set lock screen and give it a file name. Do we have a file name? Yeah. Yeah, we're just gonna give it this right here, right? Yes. Yes, because we'll build the rest of it here. Okay, good. We have one more task that we need to complete though. We haven't really talked about this much, but what we want to do is focus on the start page tile, and we want to add this image as part of the rotation of cycle images. So let's go here and do the next part. Okay, so what we'll do is, first of all, we're going to get a reference to the main page tile. And so I'm going to need to add a using statement in order to access the shell tile class. So using Microsoft.phone.shell. So shell tile.activeTiles.first or default. Now, if we don't have it pinned to the start page, then there won't be any active tiles. So let's make sure that we're working with a pinned tile first of all. So if main tile is null, then the app hasn't been pinned, and this is really a moot point. We're going to need to, what we want to do is add. All right, so assuming that we do have this pinned to our start screen, then let's do this. Cycle tile data tile data equals new cycle tile data, and tile data dot cycle images. So what we're going to do is create a list of URIs that contain the images we want to use to cycle through for the main tile. We're doing this programmatically as opposed to through the WM app manifest, because we're going to do this again dynamically. And as you can see, we're going to need to build a list of images, or a list of URIs rather. And so let's do that now. And we're just going to give it one because I'm lazy. And we're going to go to ISO store, where all of the that image data should be plus icon root plus file name, and this will be an absolute reference. Var images equals new list of URI, and then images dot add the icon URI. Okay, so now we have our list. It'll have at least one item in it. We're going to set it equal to the current cycle images, and then finally main tile, update yourself, and here is the shell tile data we want you to use. Tile data, and it only has one item in it, but I suppose we could rework this code to grab the current set of cycle images first and then add to the current set. So that wouldn't be a hard change to make. Okay, before we run this, I realized that I made a mistake here. I got a little ahead of myself here. What I need to also do after this check, right here we need to check and make sure that if the storage folder, the directory exists, and background root, then we want to go storage folder dot, if it doesn't exist, then we want to create it. If we forget to do this, then the first time we try to create this file, it's going to blow up because we're going to try and put it in a folder that doesn't exist. So I think that's all I need to do. So I'm sorry, I forgot that one little check to create the before we created the directory, and I think it's going to work this time. All right, so let's go ahead and save, and now let's cross our fingers and run. All right, let's search for night. All right, let's choose a couple of images here and then click the set button, and it says you have a new background. Oh, it asks, do you want to let this app change your lock screen? Yes. All right, so now I'm going to hit the F12 key on my keyboard twice. First time we'll shut the phone off. Second time we'll reload, and now you can see we have an image set as our lock screen. Yes. All right, phew, that was a pretty long lesson. Hopefully you're able to stick with me through it. There's a lot to do there. Now, really, let's check one last thing here. Let's go here. Let's go to our app around me, and I'm going to hold down and select Pin to Start. And you can see it uses that image as well on the cycle. And we only have one image in there. But there it is. Okay, so that's really great. Okay, so to recap, most of what we did in this lesson was very specific to creating an app that controls a lock screen. Now, while that's interesting, very few developers will need to create this specific style of app, admittedly, but that's not really the big takeaway from this lesson, in my opinion. Instead, this should give you a sense of the depth of the API and just how many aspects of the app and its integration with the Windows Phone 8 operating system you can actually control as a developer. It should also provide a good sense of how you would go about it and the skills that you would need in order to make these kinds of changes, many of which that we covered in this lesson. All right, one last lesson, and then we will wrap up. See you there. Thank you. Hi, I'm Bob Tabor with LearnVisualStudio.net. At this point, our Around Me app is just missing one final feature: the ability to randomly change the lock screen to one of the pictures that we've selected every few moments, even if the Around Me app isn't currently running. So this functionality requires that we use a scheduled task agent. And the scheduled task agent will run in the background and execute at specific intervals even while our program is not in the foreground or is not currently the app that the user is working with. So in our case, we're going to schedule the task to run every 30 seconds for debugging purposes. And so when that scheduled task executes, it'll call into our lock screen helper class's set random image from local storage method that we created in the previous lesson. So to enable this functionality, we're going to need to add a new Windows Phone Scheduled Task Agent project to our existing Around Me solution. And then we're going to need to execute code here in the lockscreenhelper.cs file of our Around Me project. But this poses a problem. Currently, this file, as well as its dependencies, like the Flickr images and the photo.cs class files, they reside in our main Around Me project. Now, we could merely cut, copy, and paste code files from the main Around Me project to our new Scheduled Task Agent project. But the better solution from a code maintenance perspective would be to create a third project, a Windows Phone class library project that would be shared then between both the main Around Me project and our new Scheduled Task Agent project. So that Windows Phone class library project would then house this lockscreenhelpers.cs, our Flickr image.cs, our photo.cs class files. And so, you know, we typically want to share code rather than duplicate code so that any changes or updates that we make in one place can be shared by all dependents. So our game plan in this lesson would be to, first of all, add a new Windows Phone Scheduled Task Agent project to our solution. We're going to add a couple of lines of code that will call the setRandomImage from local storage method and allow us to test that in the emulator. Then we're going to add a new Windows Phone class library project into our solution, and we're going to move our class files from the Around Me project into the new class library project. And we're going to need to clean up the references, make sure that we have things like the Newtonsoft's JSON library and the Microsoft.NET.HTTP library package installed in that new Windows Phone class library project. Then we'll need to create references from the main Around Me project and the Scheduled Task Agent project to the new class library project. So they'll both have a dependency on that class library project. And then in the main Around Me project, I'm going to need to introduce the Scheduled Task Agent project to the operating system by launching it when the main Around Me app starts up. We'll need to configure the WM app manifest in order to allow our app to be a lock screen background provider. We talked briefly about that in the previous lesson. And if all goes well, we're going to run it and watch the fireworks. And then we'll pretty much be done. Now, I'm not going to submit this app to the store like we did for the previous app. We already seen that process in lesson 24, I believe, in the previous series, or in the previous app, our soundboard app. But I will show you some last steps required before submitting the app to the store, including how to get a token to properly license and use the map services in your phone store app. Okay, so I don't believe that I've ever demonstrated how to add a second project to a solution in the C# Fundamentals series. Assuming that you don't know how to do this, we're going to just go up to the very top of the Solution Explorer and select the Around Me solution, and we'll right-click and select Add New Project. And in the New Project dialog, we'll want to make sure that we are in Visual C# Windows Phone Project Templates, and we're going to want to make sure to select at the very bottom the Windows Phone Scheduled Task Agent, and we're going to call this Around Me Scheduler. So Around Me.Scheduler, and click OK. And it asks what target version, of course 8.0 version. And so now you can see we have a second project in our solution, the Around Me.Scheduler. The most important part of this project is the scheduled agent.cs file, which is loaded into the main area. Most of the code in this scheduled agent.cs file is boilerplate, meaning we're not going to need to change it at all. But it must be there in order to create a valid scheduled task agent. However, if you scroll down near the bottom of this file in line number 42, I guess, you'll find the, or line number 40, you'll find the onInvoke method with a to-do comment, and this is where we're going to implement our code. And so what we'll do here is we're actually going to write one line of code. Actually, what I'm going to do is remove this to-do and add a new to-do. And the new to-do will be to set the random image from local storage. And then once we do that, we're going to need to add one more line of code, and that's scheduled action service dot launch for test, and we'll give it a task dot name time span, and we'll need to add that namespace, I guess, using system time span dot from seconds. And so we're going to execute this every 30 seconds for the purpose of testing. So we're going to come back to later here, and we're going to add code that will set the random image from local storage, but we have a little setup work to do first. Before we do that, take a look at this article on MSDN, Scheduled Action Service.Launch for Test, and this will explain why we did what we did with the line of code that I added. It basically says, use this method during application development to test your background agent implementation. Background agents are launched by the operating system according to the type of agent and the current state of the system. This scheduling logic is described in this other article, Background Agents for Windows Phone. You can use this method to launch an agent more frequently from your foreground application or from the agent itself in order to test the agent execution. This method should only be used during development. You should remove calls to this method from your production application. All right, so it's merely for testing purposes in the phone emulator. We'll want to make sure to remove this before we actually intend to send this to the store for inclusion. But otherwise, as we'll learn in a moment, when our app is deployed on a real phone, it's only going to run once every 20 to 40 minutes, and we'll talk about that more in just a moment. Now, the other option is that we could wrap this line of code in something like this. If debugger debugger.isAttached, then execute this code, and that means that it'll only execute that line of code if we're in debugging. All right, so that is an option, so that we don't have to make these changes and then, comment them out every single time that we want to make changes to our app, test it, and then redeploy it to the store. There's another article that's referenced here, and it's called Background Agents for Windows Phone, and this too is required reading, I think, before we really get too deeply into this video. If you think you ever need to do some background processing or scheduled processing, then you have to read this article. In a nutshell, there are two types of background tasks. There are resource-intensive tasks and periodic tasks. Resource-intensive tasks run in the background because they might take a long time to complete. They're processor-intensive. Periodic tasks run at set intervals. So in our case, we're creating a periodic task. And there are different rules and constraints depending on the type of background task that you're working with. Both resource-intensive tasks and periodic tasks share the following constraints. First of all, an application can only have one background agent, and only one instance of the agent will run at a time. Secondly, we're limited by which of the phone's APIs we can utilize from a background task, as detailed in this article. Third, we're limited by the amount of the phone's resources that we can use, no more than 11 megabytes for an application like ours. Fourth, our scheduled task will only work for about 2 weeks before it needs to be rescheduled by rerunning the Around Me app. All right, and then fifth, if our app crashes twice in a row, it will be unscheduled by the operating system. So in our case, since we're working with periodic tasks, we need to be aware of some additional things. For example, our task will run about every 30 minutes. However, the phone's operating system will decide when to run tasks. In fact, it might run all scheduled tasks at the same time because it's more efficient to use the phone's battery once every 30 minutes than a bunch of times during that same period for each individual scheduled task that wants to run. So that 30-minute time frame can drift as much as 10 minutes in either direction. So when we deploy our Around Me app to a phone, it'll change the image every 20 minutes to 40 minutes or so, give or take. Okay. Next, our scheduled task can only run for 25 seconds before it's shut down by the operating system. Now that shouldn't affect us, but we should be aware of that for future reference. Also, if the battery is low and the phone goes into battery saver mode, you see a little battery with a little heart over the top of it in the system tray. what that really indicates is that it has shut down scheduled tasks. It's turned off some of the functionality of the phone, like the GPS and the Bluetooth radio and more. And users can configure how aggressively they want the battery saver to be in the settings screen. I have a little battery monitoring app on my start page, and I was getting low on battery, and then I noticed that the battery saver mode kicked in, and then all of a sudden I had 20 hours left. That's because it was throttling what was going on in the background. So be aware that when you create your own scheduled tasks, the operating system might turn off your task temporarily if it needs to save battery. And then finally, depending on each phone's configuration, there might be a limit to how many background agents can run at the same time. A few days ago, I hit that limit and it asked me to choose some background tasks to shut down because the phone was low on memory, all right, as an end user. So if you're planning on submitting an app to the store, you're going to need to be willing to support users. If you want to support your users, you're going to need to know a little bit about how the phone and the operating system work with your app. If the user complains that their background is not changing often enough, you might want to ask a few questions about how many apps they're currently running. So to see what's running in the background, you go to your Windows Phone settings. Here, let me do this right now. Let's go to settings. You want to swipe over to the applications page, then you want to click the background tasks. And as you can see here, you don't have any tasks running in the background in the emulator. But you would see a list of all of the apps that are currently running in the background. So to shut one down, you just tap on the app, and then there's a little block button that appears, and you would tap on that as well. So to confirm that you've shut down the app, then you press and hold the back button to view any open apps, like so. Okay, and then you can see everything that's been opened or is currently open. Okay, and you can choose to shut those down as well, I think. All right, so at any rate, the article here does a really nice job of explaining the general life cycle of background agents as well, right, in this section here. So from this article, it says when the agent is launched, the operating system calls onInvoke. When the agent has completed its task, it should call notify complete or abort to let the operating system know that it's completed. Notify complete should be used if the task was successful. If the agent is unable to perform its task, such as a needed server being unavailable, the agent should call abort, which causes the isScheduled property to be set to false. So that is the purpose of the notify complete here in line number 47 in our code. All right, and it was there from the boilerplate when we created this project. So again, we're going to come back and revisit this to-do comment in just a little bit after we've moved our class files around from the Around Me project to a new Windows Phone class library project, which we're going to do next. So just like in step number 1, we're going to need to add a new project to our solution. So here again, click on the solution entry for the Around Me solution. Right-click, select Add New Project. And this time we want to choose a Windows Phone class library, and I'm going to call this aroundme.core, and then click OK, and click OK again. And the first thing I'm going to do is just delete this class1.cs, don't need that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I want to select from the main Around Me project. So one by one, I'm going to drag, for example, Flickr image into the new aroundme.core project. I'm going to drag the lock screen helpers.cs file into the aroundme.core project, and the photo.cs into the aroundme core project. And then the next thing I'm going to do is delete them from the aroundme project, since they're now in the aroundme core project. Okay, so since we have these files in our aroundme.core project, we're going to have to rely on NuGet once again to install the packages that we've relied on for these files, namely the newtonsoft.json and the microsoft.net.http class or packages. So let's open up the package manager console, and I want to change the default package to aroundme.core. And then I want to type in install dash package newtonsoft.json, and then I want to install package microsoft.net.http. Great. All right, and just to make sure here I've got everything I need. All right, and just to make sure that everything works correctly in the AroundMe.core project, I'm going to right-click and select Build from the context menu on the project name, AroundMe.core, and it looks like I've succeeded, so that's good. And now in the Solution Explorer in the Around Me project, I want to add a reference to the Around Me core project since it has the files that I need. So right-click on References, select Add Reference, and then we want to choose the Solution tab, and we want to make a reference to the AroundMe.core project and click OK. All right, and at this point then, what you want to do is we're going to take a look at our main page.xaml.cs and just kind of comb through it and look for any problems. I don't see any there. Let's look at the search results.xaml.cs and comb through it and look for any problems, anything that might be missing. Typically what you'll see, unless even maybe we should try to build it and see what happens. Right click and build. Okay, yeah, so we do find some problems. Let's go ahead and double click on the, we can see that we're relying on this lock screen helpers class, and the exception we get is that it's inaccessible due to its protection level. So we need to go into the AroundMe.core, open up the lockscreenhelpers.cs, and you can see we haven't adorned that class with a public, so with a public keyword. So now we'll add that. I'm going to rebuild just the AroundMe.core, and now I'm going to try to rebuild the main Around Me project, and it should be able to see that lock screen helpers. Yes, and we've succeeded. Very good. So whenever I see the term protection level in an error message, that usually means a visibility problem. In other words, our old code can't see our new code. And usually that's because I'm missing an accessibility modifier in the new code, like public. All right, so now I'm looking at the lockscreenhelpers.cs class or file, and I see something else. I've moved these files to a new project and named that project deliberately to give us a new namespace. So I called the new project AroundMe.core. However, when I look at the current namespace, it's only Around Me. Do I want the namespace to be Around Me? I think I'd prefer it to match the project name. So what I'm going to do is change AroundMe.core in each of the class files. So I made that change to the lockscreenhelpers.cs. I'll make it to the Flickr image, and I'm going to make it to the photo.cs file. We'll save all that, and I'm going to rebuild this. And now I'm going to need to add a using statement to the search results.xaml.cs. I think that's the only one that really has a dependency on the AroundMe.core. So we're going to add using AroundMe.core, and we'll save it, and we'll try building the Around Me project again to make sure it can see everything and it builds correctly, and it does. Great. All right, so the next thing I want to do is create a reference from the Around Me scheduler to the Around Me core, since it's going to also need the code inside of Around Me core. So I'm going to right click on References and select Add Reference, go down to the Solution tab, and then choose to create a reference to the AroundMe.core and click OK. And then what I want to do is open up the scheduledagents.cs, and I'm going to add a using statement to the AroundMe.core namespace. Okay. Now in that same file, earlier we added this to-do comment. We can make the following change to this onInvoke method now. We can call lockscreenhelpers dot set random image from local storage, like so. And I think the final thing that we need to do at this point is to register our new background scheduled task agent with the operating system. So we're going to do this when our main Around Me app first fires up. So we'll be adding the code to the app.xaml.cs in the application launching event handler. And there's quite a bit of code here. So let's go ahead, I'm going to type it in and then we'll talk about it. All right, so there's two basic activities in this code passage. First, we're trying to find if there's any running versions of our background scheduled task agent. If it's running, then we're going to want to remove it from the scheduled action service, which acts as a registrar for the operating system's scheduled tasks. And then secondly, here, we're going to create an instance of our background scheduled task agent and register it with the scheduled action service. So why do we try to remove it and then re-add it? Well, keep in mind what we said earlier. After 2 weeks, our scheduled task will be descheduled. So this little dance simply keeps our background scheduled task agent scheduled and operating for another 2 weeks or so. So notice that we set the task's description property here in line number 75 in the video. This will be displayed to the end user if they look at the background tasks in the settings like I did a few moments ago at the very bottom of the page where you can choose to block the app. So it's a good reminder to the user of what this particular background scheduled task agent is doing in case that they've forgotten that they've actually installed your app and what this app is trying to do. So here again, in line number 79, we've seen this before, the launch for test method. We did this in the AroundMe.scheduler to schedule the background task for its first execution for development purposes in the phone emulator. And then what we're going to need to do is one last task here. What I need to do is make a change in the WM appmanifest.xml file. Here again, we're not going to be able to use the designer. We're going to have to make manual edits to it. So I'm going to right click it and select Open With and choose the XML text editor with encoding and click OK. And click OK again. Okay. And we want to focus on this tasks area, and beneath this default task, I'm actually going to paste in some code here. So what exactly does this do? Well, let's take a look at this page that you see on screen right now. And if you look about halfway down, and I think I'm just going to search for it, search for extended task element, you can see that the extended tasks element is a child of the tasks element and contains the background service agent elements. This element defines the use of multiple tasks by an app. Extended tasks are named by the developer. Currently, you can use extended task element only when you define background tasks. So remember, the WM app manifest.xml is there mostly for certification purposes into the store and to introduce your app into the phone's operating system and allow it to become part of the phone's ecosystem. And so here's a great example. We tell the phone's operating system that we want this part of our app, the AroundMe.scheduler, here, to be included with the other background task agents that are currently running. We're registering with the background task agent scheduler to let it know that we want it to run within our app, namely the Around Me scheduler. All right, and we give it a name and a description and so on. Okay. So in order for the Around Me app to register the Around Me scheduler, we need to add a reference to it. So right-click References and select Add Reference. Go to Solution, and we're going to choose AroundMe.scheduler and click OK. At this point, if we were to run the app, we would discover a bug. After the lock screen is changed once, it will never change again. The problem is that our lock screen helper methods are marked as void instead of returning a task. So when we call the setLockScreen method from our AroundMe.scheduler, it's fired, but instead of waiting for setRandomImageFromLocalStorage method to finish, notifyComplete is called and the method goes out of scope, and so setRandomImageFromLocalStorage never gets a chance to complete its job. And so to fix the bug, you're going to need to change several things in several places. Basically, we need to make everything awaitable, and we need to return a task from each of the methods that are used inside of the setRandomImageFromLocalStorage. So, for example, setRandomImageFromLocalStorage should be marked as async and should return a task. Furthermore, it should, when it calls into setImage should be set as async and return a task, making it awaitable from the setRandomImageFromLocalStorage method. Furthermore, when we call setLockScreen, it too should be marked as async, return a task, and then our call to it should be marked as awaitable. And then we need to make sure, I believe we've already gotten the await keyword in for request access async. Next, what you're going to need to do is make sure that in the search results.xaml.cs, wherever we call setRandomImageFromLocalStorage, you need to mark that with await, which will require that we make this method async. And then we need to go to the scheduledagent.cs. When we call setRandomImageFromLocalStorage, mark that with await, which would require us to add the async keyword there as well. And I'm pretty sure that's the last thing that we need to do to make this work. Let me take a look at the one last place here in the app.xaml.cs. I think we're good there. Okay. So this time when we run the app, and we do a search, and we choose some files, and we'll want to make sure to get a distinctive list so it's obvious that the tile has changed. Here's a good blurry photo and a cool nighttime photo, and we'll click the set button. You have new background. We'll go ahead and click the start button, and then I'll hit the F12 key on my keyboard twice. I've edited out what you see now over about 10 minutes time or so, and it's changed a couple of times during that time. It seems to be taking longer than 30 seconds to swap these out. However, typically after a few minutes the lock screen is changed, and like I said, it's done it several times. So got it working. That's cool. Okay, so there are a few final steps that we need to take before we're ready to ship this and submit it to the store for inclusion. First, you'll recall, let's get back here, that in this lesson we used the launch for test method a couple of times. Let's get to our scheduledagent.cs, our launch for test method. And so we're going to need to search throughout the entire solution for the launch for test method. Recall that we have a reference to it here and in the app.xaml.cs project. Right here, okay? And as I said earlier, you're either going to want to comment these out or wrap them in a check for the debugger like I did earlier, where we wrap if debugger is attached around these lines of code. And then obviously we're going to want to thoroughly test our app. I have not thoroughly tested this app. It might blow up if you were to use it under certain circumstances, and there's probably more work that could be done here to bolster it and make it more bulletproof. I'd recommend allowing a few friends or family to use it, or better yet, find a group of developers in your area that would be willing to take a look and make recommendations. I was recently at a Nokia developer event, and there were a lot of developers exchanging business cards and showing each other what they were working on. It was really cool. This could be a great way to inexpensively find testers and to actually build some good contacts in the development community. So I'd recommend that you get involved by checking out on their events page. I think you can find it here at develop.com/events. All right. And so then another option is to locate the Microsoft developer evangelist in your area and ask them if they have any events that are scheduled. I would do a search on Bing for something like Microsoft developer evangelist and then put in your city, your state, your region, your country, whatever the case might be. Or search for Windows Phone user group and then type in your city, your closest city, state, region, or the country you live in. And you might have to get kind of creative here and try different things and different wording to find a group or an evangelist near you, but they're out there. Developer evangelists usually have blogs, they have Twitter accounts, or they have mailing lists through MSDN or TechNet that you can subscribe to in order to learn about meetups, user groups, code camps, and things of that nature in your local area. Or you could always write the developer evangelist an email and introduce yourself and tell them what you're looking for. But once you're ready to submit to the store, you should pay particular attention to the APIs that you're going to be calling. For example, we use the Windows Phone 8 Maps control and Flickr, so make sure the account that you're using for those services are up to date and that you're providing the correct credentials. With regards to the map control, you're going to need to get an application ID and an authentication token from the Developer Center. Look at this article for information on adding the application ID and authentication token. But in a nutshell, I'm going to add a loaded event handler into the Around Me map. So let's go to let's get all this cleaned up here, to the main page.xaml. And we'll find the map control, so the Around Me map, and here we're going to add a loaded, and I'll just go ahead and create a new event handler, and then I'll navigate to it. And then inside of here, you would want to do something like this. So map settings, and so we'll have to add a using statement to Microsoft.phone.maps. Map settings dot application context dot application ID, and you would set that here, and then pretty much the same thing for the authentication token. All right, and where do you get these? Well, let's go back out to HTTP dev.windowsphone.com. I'm going to sign in, and I'm going to go to publish, and I'll submit an app. And you'll recall here that there was this map services option, and this is what we would use, this optional task, to get the token required to use map services in your app. It'll give you the application ID and the authentication token that you need to fill in here. All right, so let's go ahead and comment that out for now. All right, so to recap, the big takeaway was how to create a scheduled task and share common code in a library, and how to test the scheduled task in the emulator, and the challenges that were involved. We also learned about the final steps, not the least of which was how to receive a token for map services. So in the final lesson, I just have a few comments to make, and we'll wrap up this series. We'll see you there. Thank you. Congratulations, you made it to the end of another video series, and that is no small task. It took a lot of commitment to do that, not to mention time and attention, but hopefully you enjoyed the series and you were compiling ideas along the way, as well as building your confidence, not to mention gaining knowledge of the phone's API, the techniques for working in the Visual Studio IDE and working with the phone emulator and so forth. So often people ask me for some recommendations on books or other resources, and honestly I have no books that I'll recommend at this time. Things just change too quickly to really recommend anything like that for this platform. However, what I would recommend is this, that you keep abreast of the new changes in the Windows Phone world through their phone blog, so at the URL on screen. And as I was looking through this, I realized that there was a promotion that I wanted to take advantage of, and I will do that after recording this video. But it also contains news and updates that you want to know straight from Microsoft. And then there's another site, I guess it's more like a fan site. It's called WPCentral.com. It's a great site. It'll keep you abreast of the new devices and the apps that are going to come out for the platform. It's really well done. Also more pertinent to this series, the Windows Phone developer blog at this URL. It will give you updates on the new functionality and maybe some long-form articles discussing various features of the phone. So it's a great way to fit training into those gray moments of your life when you're just sitting there with nothing to do and you can read a quick article in 5 minutes. Okay, so I'd recommend that. Next, I'd recommend that you check out this article on MSDN, What's New in the Windows Phone SDK 8.0. It gives a great overview of many of the new and advanced features on the platform, and as I was starting this whole series of videos, this is where I started. It gave me a good rundown of the new things that I needed to know about the platform, so I highly recommend it. Also, before you get started building your own apps, if you haven't done so already, you'll want to get a Developer Phone Center membership. It'll take a little bit of time for the verification through Symantec, and it might even take a little bit longer if you're like me and you have a tiny business with no history with Dun & Bradstreet or a phone number that you want to make public. They're going to need to go through some extra steps, but they will get you authenticated and will verify and will ultimately get you a Phone Developer Center membership. I had the most contrived possible scenario, and they worked with me to get it figured out. So make sure you get started on that process early. And then if you haven't already done so, you're going to want to get a Windows Phone 8 device. Again, it's not a requirement, but it sure does help to deploy the app that you're working on a physical device before you submit it to the store. And so, of course, I'm going to recommend the Nokia Lumia 920, which I've fallen in love with. I've been using this for about a month and a half so far. And I'm just an individual here. I'm not speaking on behalf of Microsoft when I say that I'm no stranger to the devices of other manufacturers and platforms from other companies, but this phone and the ecosystem that's around it, as well as the Surface and my new overpowered Windows 8 computer that I just built, the whole process has been a blast. I love pinning tiles on the phone. I love seeing them update with new information. I love the built-in SkyDrive support, especially in OneNote and Office for the Windows Phone 8 platform. The camera's awesome, like I said at the outset. And I've never owned a Nokia product before, but I'm really impressed with the phone itself and moreover with their dedication to the Windows Phone 8 platform. So my last recommendation is to get involved in their develop.com website, www.dvlup.com website. They're incentivizing developers to create apps and register them on the site to win prizes through a currency that's called Develop or Develop Reward Points. You can trade them in to get free phones, advertisements in the store, special placement in the store, and so on. They have challenges. I think at this moment they have 42 challenges running. So you complete the challenge, and depending on the complexity of the challenge, you earn more points. Really cool idea, and I appreciate the fact that they're willing to do that. And so I also want to sincerely thank Randy Arnold, who is a Nokia developer ambassador in my area, for taking me under his wing and explaining Nokia's strategy, showing me how develop works and why it's a great opportunity for developers and how it supports the Windows 8 platform. I also want to thank Larry Lieberman and Desiree Lockwood for their support in getting me the assets that I need for this series. As always, thanks to Golnaz and Dan Fernandez, because they're always awesome here at Channel 9. And most of all, I wanted to thank Clint Rutkiss, who is the man. Not only did he do most of the heavy lifting up front by building these great apps that we had the pleasure of learning from, but he also was patient with me. He answered, like I said at the outset, over 100 emails and helped guide this series as I was both new to learning the features of the Windows 8 platform, Phone 8 platform. I appreciate his approach and his thought process as he set out to build these apps. It was a valuable learning experience for me and hopefully for you too. So thank you, Clint. And if you like what we did here and you want more of this kind of training, then make sure you let Channel 9 and Microsoft know. They will get you the resources that you want. And if you like this series, there's plenty more where this came from. Please take just 3 minutes to check out my website, www.learnvisualstudio.net, where I have tons of video training just like this on a wide variety of .NET topics. All right, so finally, thank you for your kind attention. And as we part ways, I sincerely wish you the best. Let me know what you built. I'd love to check it out. And if I can ever help you out, please email me at bob@learnvisualstudio.net. Thank you.